Hello everyone and welcome back to War Thunder. Today I am finishing out my series of the rank 1 aircraft in War Thunder, finishing it off strong in my opinion with the French. So these are the new kids on the block here, the newest nation in the game. They were released a few months ago. And in terms of their tech tree, they actually have quite a lot of rank 1 aircraft. So, moving down, you know, get some decent stuff. You got quite a few jets for a new nation. Couple of really awesome looking premium aircraft. I'll have to review this baby someday. But we're focusing on these guys today. So, as always, we'll start off with the reserve aircraft. Now, as you notice, I only get 2 of those. Huh, where's the third one? Oh, here it is. The French are one of 2 nations in the game, I think. The French and the Italians that actually have a bit of variety in their reserve planes. You get the D500, the D373, and the D371. Now, the 371 and the 373 aren't terribly different, but they do have their differences. They're not just copy-paste aircraft. So let's actually take a look at these guys and see what the French bring to the table. So the D371, you get 4 machine guns. That's a plus. 4 machine guns on a reserve aircraft is always lovely. The one thing I have with these machine guns is that they are 7.5 caliber. Now, in my British video, those were 7.7, so these are even smaller than the British guns. In fact, I think these are the smallest machine guns in the game. But they also carry very nice belts, as I'll show you here when we review onto the aircraft. But just remember, you are shooting the smallest bullets in the game. And from my knowledge, it seems that a lot of French aircraft rock these 7.5s. So anyway, your turn time, 12.4 seconds, which is very nice, despite the fact that you are not actually a biplane. You are a monoplane with what kind of looks like half a biplane. You can kind of almost throw a second wing on there and be like, hey, it's a biplane now. But it's nice because you can have a decent amount of speed, because obviously there's less drag. But when we talk about drag, there's rods and things just sticking out everywhere, so you are not that fast. But just to keep in mind, you do only have 1 wing as opposed to biplanes, which doesn't really matter. It's reserve aircraft. You still have a really decent turn time anyway, so you're actually going to be able to compete with a lot of different planes in the turn. You actually could give the Japanese a good run for their money in these things. But anyway, looking on the inside, you see that there's absolutely no armor plating whatsoever. Most reserve planes, this is going to be the same thing. With this, however, your pilot is incredibly exposed. He doesn't even have that little hump that's back here to protect the back of his head, so pilot snipes in this thing are fairly common. So just be wary about that. And then on the internals, you can see where your machine guns are here in these little pods hanging off of the top of the wing, or the bottom of the wing, I should say. and everything is very small into one area. It's a non-self-sealing fuel tank, so fires in this thing are absolutely devastating, just like most reserve aircraft. But because you have nothing in this big wing right here, you are going to be a fairly durable aircraft. So with this guy, I would recommend I kind of use a hybrid style of boom and zoom and turn tactics. So really just kind of play this thing however you want. That's the beauty about these things and why I like them so much. Then you get the D373, which does have a few differences. You are a little bit faster. You don't turn as well, but you still turn pretty darn well, because remember, in War Thunder, this is only a rudder turn. So really, your turn time is going to be something like 7.4 seconds. You get the same armament as before, with the 7.5 machine guns. I think they're a different variant, though. The MLE-33 versus, yeah, the MAC 1934. So you do get a little bit of difference in the machine guns. I haven't really noticed that great of a difference in them. You still get 4 of them, and they have relatively the same fire rate. Except this time, they're actually integrated into the wing. You can see these little guys here. So that's going to reduce on drag because they're not in pods hanging under the wing. As you can tell here, it's pretty much the same aircraft, just a few minor changes here and there, just to kind of modernize things a little bit. No armor. You can tell these are different guns now. They don't have these big drums sitting on top of them. And pretty much the exact same thing on the internals. This is another great little plane. It's just different. It also has a tow hook on here, so you can land on aircraft carriers, which is nice. But then again, most reserve aircraft are fairly easy to land, so you can land on aircraft carrier. But it is going to help if you play realistic. So then moving on to the D500. Now this is the one that changes up the look and the playstyle a little bit. Now, you still have 4 machine guns, except 2 of them are the MAC machine guns, and 2 are the Darnay or Darnair machine guns. And you get 600 rounds per each of them, so each gun has 300 rounds in it, which is a generous amount. These guns do fire relatively quickly, so I mean, I would hope with the smaller bullet you get a faster rate of fire. But as you could tell, completely different design. It's more, I would say, closer to a modern fighter design. You also get some armor plating here. You get an armor plate here behind the engine, which will protect your pilot from head-ons, but it is only 3 millimeters thick, so be careful about that, just because American 50 cals will be able to rip right through this plane. You also get an armor plating here in the back to protect the pilot from the back, but he's also still very exposed in there. He does have that little hump right there I was talking about, but that's really not going to do all that much. And then moving on to the internals, you can see that you do have some fuel tanks here in the wings that are non-self-sealing, and that's probably going to be the biggest downfall of this plane, is the wings do contain fairly decently sized fuel tanks, although they only go like maybe a fourth of the way down the wing. But just be aware you do have fuel tanks inside the wings. You are a little bit slower, I think, than the 373. Yeah, you're only 335 versus or 235 versus 267, but at most reserve gameplay, most like where you're with biplanes and whatnot, speed isn't going to be your biggest factor, it's going to be your maneuverability, which you are going to have a 7.2 turn time, because again, this is a rudder turn. If you actually use your ailerons to turn, you will turn significantly faster. None of these planes here have any flap control, which is I mean, reserve planes, they turn so well already, you don't really need flaps. The only reason why you would need them is if you need help landing. The other downside to this plane is you do have a very blocky engine here. It does take up a lot of the aircraft, so just be mindful of attacking people from the front. So then moving on to the tech tree here, we go on to the F2222. This guy is a big boy. It is a French heavy bomber, which you don't get a lot of, but yeah, this thing is massive. I haven't flown it out all that much, but I have faced off against it a lot. First off, you are a lovely salmon pink color, so you stick out a lot. Also, the fact that you are very, very large for a reserve plane. So, keep that in mind. You are very, very big. Your bomb loadout is actually really impressive. Slap that one on there. Your top loadout is you get 100. You get 7 100 kilogram bombs, and then 10 200s. And it's got a very large bomb bay in here, which your bombs are not and nothing's attached to the wings other than the engines. So that's good, I guess, in terms of speed, but I don't have this thing fully unlocked, but I will say this. You're lucky to go over 250. You are very lucky to go over 260. And then again, in realistic, I wouldn't recommend going too fast in this thing because this thing likes to rip apart at high speeds. So, moving on to your defensive armament, it actually is pretty nice for a battle ranking 1.3 bomber. You got a 7.5 turret here, a 7.5 turret here, and a 7.5 turret here. Now, I'm actually going to go into the test flight here just to kind of show you the coverage that these turrets give, which is actually really nice. The only problem is, though, is that they are single-mounted turrets, so if your gunner is reloading or gets knocked out, there really is nothing to help control you with in terms of controlling an engagement with fighters, but fairly large cone of fire. I doubt there's really any blind spots here. This bottom turret on the bottom does rotate 360 degrees, so there is going to be a few seconds there before he can turn around all the way. As you can tell, there is a blind spot kind of directly above the plane, and I'm thinking maybe directly below. Yeah, so be careful of that. You do have retractable landing gear, so just something that's cool, I guess. But like I said, you are a large salmon pink color, very slow, very large target. So this is something that people love shooting at these things, but fortunately enough, this thing is absolutely freaking durable. Just kind of showing off the rate of fire of these machine guns here, and just showing you that cone of fire. And then heading on to the bomb bay, how that looks is everything just drops right out of the middle, which is nice. Nothing clinging onto the side of the wings. Yes, look at those large explosions. So now, going on to the internals of this plane, you're going to see why this thing is a flying fortress. This plane does not like getting shot down. It refuses to go down. Now, granted, at Battle Ranking 1.3, you're not going to have very large bullets coming at you. You're mostly just going to have these little pew-pew machine guns. So, nothing is going to be ripped off. Which is ironic because you don't have any armor at all. But just look how spaced out everything is in the plane. You've got some fuel tanks here, but they're just so far and spread out from one another across this football-sized wing, football field-sized wing, that, this thing just does not like going down. And for being a slow, pink-colored target flying through the air, that's a very nice plus to have. So this bomber is actually quite nice, and I would enjoy it more. I've actually flown it out in a few realistic battles. It's just I'm not a big bomber pilot. I actually like shooting at other players versus just bombing little circles on the ground. So moving on to the CR-174 at Battle Ranking 1.7. You'll find out that a lot of the French aircraft are unique in their design. This plane actually started off as a racing plane, and they just happened to slap a bunch of guns on there and then just called it good. It is a very odd looking plane with very stubby landing gear, but I've actually really grown to enjoying this thing. I would recommend you using boom and zoom tactics in this plane, just because you're not the most maneuverable thing in the world, but you can make a turn or two if needed. You do have the same armament as a lot of the reserve planes. You have the 4 machine guns here in the wings, in these little pods here that hang off the bottom. But really, just this plane, what you want to do is just boom and zoom tactics, and basically that's it. In terms of the belts that I wanted to talk about, the universal belt comes with a tracer bullet, an armor piercing bullet, and then an incendiary bullet. I usually just either rock with the the tracer belt. It's basically all incendiary tracers, though that's basically the incendiary belt. Or I use the stealth belt. I really just use the stealth belt most often, just because at this low a battle ranking, I really don't want other planes knowing that I am shooting at them. So the stealth belts are usually the good ones to go for. So then moving on to the D501, which is a upgraded version of the D500, I'm pretty sure this is the lowest battle ranking plane where you get a cannon. You get a 20mm Hispano 404 cannon inside the propeller there that fires through the engine block. Granted, you only get 60 rounds with it, but if that cannon hits, especially against biplanes, you will destroy a lot of things with this cannon. You also get a really nice camo scheme. It looks like a bird on top of the wing. But anyway. 2 7.5mm machine guns is kind of your backup. Most of the hard-hitting work is going to be done by the cannon here. Same armor plating as before on the D500, and the internals are basically the same. They just yanked out the 2 7.5 machine guns in the nose and threw a 20mm cannon in there. So unless they come out with a reserve plane that has a 20mm cannon in it, this plane is the lowest battle ranking non-premium plane to come with a cannon, which is nice. So then moving on to the NC-2233, which is an upgraded version of the Flying Salmon bomber. Basically, the only big difference between that one and this one is the addition of 20mm cannons in the turrets. Now, you also are very slow in this one. I believe you also get a similar bomb loadout. Yeah, you do. It's just instead of 10 and 15, it's 12 and 15 or something like that. I usually don't care much for bombers in this game unless they have very large bomb loadouts, but basically the one thing you need to watch out for is it does have two 20mm cannon turrets that do rotate 360 degrees and have a very nice firing arc. I'm not going to take this out into a test flight because it's basically the exact same plane as the previous bomber. You just move up a full battle ranking to 2.3 because you have two 20mm cannon turrets. Your engines are a little bit different, but who cares? The engines are still incredibly weak because they have to, they have to carry this behemoth of a plane. Again, no armor, but the internals are basically the same. The fuel tanks are a little bit closer together here, but they're still really spread out over this large wing. So this thing is also very much a flying tank that just likes to hit harder back at what's shooting at it. Then moving on to the H-75A1, which is pretty much a P-36 Hawk from the American tech tree that the French just sort of put a really nice looking camo scheme on it and then just put their guns in it. I'm not going to review these planes much because if you've flown out a P-36 Hawk, you've flown out this thing. It's the exact same armor plating as the Hawks and pretty much the exact same on the internals, except now you get the 7.5 machine guns in the nose and then two 7.5 machine guns in the wings. So at battle ranking 1.3, having 4 machine guns on a P-36 Hawk, see, it even says Curtiss on the back here, which is the company that made the Hawk. It's nice. It's nice having 4 guns on a battle ranking 1.3 Hawk. So, would I say this is the best Hawk in the game? No. Is it a good one? Yes. And then moving on to the A4 variant. Basically the exact same thing, except now you just have more machine guns. Instead of having 1 in each wing, you now have 2. There's a few differences in, like the engine here, I believe is a little bit more powerful than the previous one. You have a different cowling design around the front of the aircraft. But it's basically, it's another P-36. It's closer to the G variant because it has 6 guns versus 4 of the C variant. But they're really nice planes because they're Hawks with a lot of guns, which was the biggest downfall of the Hawk. It barely had any armament. So then moving on to the V156F, which I've already reviewed both in the British tech tree and the American tech tree. This is a Vindicator with French armament. I think once the French dropped and once they had these, they just kind of gave one to every tech tree that had them. It's the exact same armor plating with the weird Lego block looking things. Exact same armament as the early one that only had 30 cals. It's probably the worst one in the game, to be honest, because it uses French guns, but it's the exact same plane. It's a complete downgrade. I would not really consider flying this thing out all that much. Its one redeeming feature is that it does have a very nice camo. If you are a French ground attacker and you want this, then go ahead. It's still capable in ground attacking. You just have much better ones in the American and the British tech tree. Then moving on to the Potez, which the Potezes in this game are kind of like the poster child of the low-tier French planes. This one, however, is strictly the bomber variant. Again, I haven't flown this out all that much because I'm not a huge bomber fan. You do get one 7.5 machine gun that faces forward. You got one that faces backward. You control this one here, so you can shoot at ground targets with it. But being the smallest machine gun in the game, I really wouldn't recommend it. I would just mostly just use your bombs. This plane is fairly durable in the fact that it really doesn't have that much to shoot at in terms of the wings. But with no armor plating whatsoever, your pilot and your gunner are going to get killed very quickly. And in terms of bomb loadouts, you get 8 50s or 2 100s or 2 200s. So if you want a bomb in the French tech tree, stick with these guys. Or the Martin down here, which I'll show off in a second. So then you get the MS-405C1. Now this plane is basically a 501, but they just sort of beefed it up a little bit. It's the exact same armament loadout. There's your 20mm cannon there in the nose. There's your two 7.5 machine guns in the wings. You get no armor plating whatsoever, and your internals. You do have this one big fuel tank here in the middle. It doesn't say it's self-sealing or non-self-sealing, so I would just recommend not getting shot at in this thing, because no armor means a dead pilot. The one thing I would recommend you watching out for in this plane is that you are a fairly decent looking monoplane, but you have biplane speeds. This plane does not like to climb. This plane does not like to turn. This plane does not like to perform a lot of maneuvers just because it bleeds off speed so much. So it's a good plane in terms of a battle ranking 1.7 with a 20mm cannon, but just I would stick to your edge of the map just because you're really not going to outrun all that much if something's chasing after you. But it's still a good plane. I'm not trying to say this is a bad plane. I'm just saying be careful. Which then you get to the Potez 630 here. And this is probably the best low-tier French aircraft because you do have a very nice turn time. You're kind of slow, but you get two 20mm Hispano cannons right underneath here. Now there is one, I believe, at Tier 2 that I'll talk about when I talk about Tier 2 French aircraft that does have machine guns out in the wings along with the cannons, but this is probably the best French aircraft at rank 1. Just because it has two 20mm cannons on it, and it does not like any sort of maneuverability whatsoever because these engines are very weak. Unfortunately, that's kind of a theme with French aircraft, is that their engines are very lackluster. No armor plating, internals, really nothing much in the wings. The fuel tanks are self-sealing and they are tucked up against the wings, but with no armor plating, your gunner and your pilot are going to be killed relatively easily. Then we go to the Martin 167A3. Now, I recently just unlocked this plane. Be careful though, you do jump to battle ranking 2.3 with this. But this is... I don't know why this plane is in the bomber line. It does get some bomb loadouts here. These are like 58 kilograms in these. So basically, you just get a lot of small bombs. But it does have some decent forward-facing armament here. You get two 7.5s here in each wing. And it would look like it would have a turret down here, but it doesn't. This is your only turret right here. And it unfortunately does not have that great of a firing arc to it. This turret does not rotate. So, again, since I'm not that much of a bomber pilot, I wouldn't be able to tell you all that much about it. No armor plating whatsoever, and pretty darn big fuel tanks here in the wings. So I would actually recommend doing a lot of ground pounding with this rather than going after the bases, just simply because you do have these forward-facing guns here that can clean up some like artillery, AA guns, save the bombs for your light pillboxes, and maybe some armored columns. I don't know, it depends how many bombs you get on target. Then the last plane here at Battle Ranking 2.0, as you can tell, the French have some pretty low battle ranking stuff. There's some stuff at tier 1 that you get to like 2.7. I think the highest thing that they do have at tier 1 is battle ranking 2.3, so fairly low ranking stuff. Is the MS-406C1, which is basically a upgraded version of this guy here, the MS-405, MS-406. Really the only difference is that you go up a battle ranking from 1.7 to 2.0. You exact same, no armor. The internals pretty much the exact same. The Hispano still there. Your machine guns still here. Fun aircraft when you actually get kills with it, but don't do anything too fancy, because once again you are going biplane speeds in a monoplane. The engine isn't that great, but it's still fun because you do have that 20mm cannon, and a lot of people like to go head on with you, forgetting that you have a 20mm cannon right in the nose. So, moving on to the premiums here, Palaires, D510. I actually purchased this one because it is a upgraded version of the D501 here. This is the 510. Now the 510 has a slightly more powerful engine. It has a 3 mounted prop here. It has 3 props instead of 2. So it is a little bit more powerful. You're going to be able to sustain your maneuverability a little bit more. You still have the 20mm cannon here and the machine guns here in the wings. You also get a nice little shark. You get a cute little shark here on the side of your plane. That's mainly one of the big reasons why I got this thing. But it's, I believe, the reserve, or like a copy of the reserve planes that you get if you have the French be your first victory in air forces. So pretty much the exact same as this, except just a little bit more powerful. Then you get this thing. I don't know what to tell about this thing. The D371 HS9. It's like the same frame and, you know, flight characteristics as these guys, except it gets 2 20mm cannons. Yeah, with 60 rounds apiece, so you're gonna run out of ammo fairly quickly. You know, same internals, you just get cannons. Here's the problem with cannons on biplanes. I'm actually gonna take this out into a test flight because you get this in a bundle, which I believe is $4.99, or it might be $9.99 now because of the sale. The VE sale is no longer in effect. But this is the biggest problem with this particular plane here, yes, you're going to be very punchy if you can hit anything, because watch the reticule. And see, look, now you're already out of ammo. And that's a 30-second reload. So, you get all the maneuverability and all the great things about these little planes. You just don't have any ammo with your super punchy guns. Also, the recoil of these things, because the guns in this game do have recoil, they just... I can understand why this wouldn't be in the normal tech tree. See, I'm just now reloaded. But trying to go after targets with this thing, you need to be very, very conservative with that trigger. And just like that, I'm already down to 34 rounds. Oh, there's 2. And I'm done. So... unfortunately, with very maneuverable aircraft that need a lot of time to get rounds onto, you can get on target, but then your guns are gonna kick you around. So, for that reason alone, I personally will have to pass on this thing, just because, yeah, cannons on this thing are really cool. And it's really nice to have that punchy of armament at such a low battle ranking, but I feel like maybe if they just kept one 20mm here in the nose and then maybe 2 machine guns here in the wings, it would have been a much better aircraft. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass on this. If you can deal with the recoil, then that's more power to you. If you could deal with the ammo loadout, more power to you. But anyway, French came out into the game swinging. You got really powerful bombers. Well, not powerful, but really durable bombers. Some very nice planes with early tier cannons. And I would have to say the Hawks have to be my favorite. These guys are okay with the 20mm cannons. This thing's absolutely amazing with the 2 20mm cannons, but you're as slow as a biplane and larger than any biplane. But yeah, I would say the French came out of the gate swinging. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be working on my Tier 2 videos. All I need to do is just actually get the Tier 2 aircraft for some of these nations. Mostly these guys. So anyway, guys, have a great day.